You pour milk into a bowl, you wait, and somehow, it becomes yogurt. That transformation, simple, quiet, almost invisible, might be the single most important accident in human food history. Not fire, not bread, not wine, yogurt. Because yogurt didn't just feed people, it allowed people to survive. Before cities, before writing, before borders. And here's the wild part: no one invented yogurt on purpose. Now let's rewind way back. Around 10,000 years ago, humans were no longer just hunters. They had started domesticating animals: goats, sheep, cattle. Milk entered the human diet at scale for the first time. But raw milk had a problem. It spoiled fast, in hot climates, sometimes in hours. Drink it too late, and it could make you seriously sick or worse. Early humans didn't understand bacteria. They didn't know chemistry. But they understood patterns. Milk left alone in warmth didn't always rot. Sometimes it thickened, sometimes it turned sour but not deadly. Sometimes it lasted days longer than it should have. That wasn't luck. That was lactic acid fermentation, though nobody had a word for it yet. Milk, stored in animal skin bags or clay containers, came into contact with naturally occurring bacteria. These bacteria consumed lactose and produced lactic acid. The acid lowered the pH, killing harmful microbes and preserving the milk. What came out the other side was thicker, tangier, safer, and more nutritious. That substance was yogurt, not invented, discovered, and it changed everything. Because once milk could be preserved, humans could travel farther, store food longer, and depend on livestock year-round. Yogurt wasn't just food, it was infrastructure for early civilization. This process didn't happen in one place. It happened anywhere humans raised animals and lived in warmth. Central Asia, the Middle East, parts of Eastern Europe, the Indian subcontinent. Multiple cultures stumbled onto the same solution because they faced the same problem. That's why there is no single birthplace of yogurt. Anyone who claims otherwise is selling national pride, not history. So before we go any further, quick heads up: if you're into real food history, the kind that cuts through myths and marketing, hit subscribe now. This channel doesn't chase trends, it builds authority. And this story, this one deserves your full attention. But some regions shaped yogurt more than others. Nomadic herders in Central Asia lived on the move. They carried milk in animal skins strapped to horses or camels. Heat, motion, time, perfect conditions for fermentation. Yogurt became a staple not as a luxury, but as survival fuel. It was portable, digestible, high in protein and fat, and unlike raw milk, it didn't betray you. This is where language gives us clues. The word yogurt comes from Turkish yogurt, derived from the verb yokurmak, meaning to thicken or to knead. That alone tells us something important. Yogurt wasn't exotic. It wasn't ceremonial. It was everyday food, so normal it became a verb. By the 11th century, yogurt was already deeply embedded in Turkic culture. Written records like Duan al-Turk describe yogurt as a dietary staple, not a novelty, not medicine, just food. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean, ancient Greeks were eating something called oxygala, fermented milk product often mixed with honey. It wasn't identical to modern yogurt, but it lived in the same family. Thickened milk, sour edge, easier digestion. And the Romans noticed. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century, described barbarian tribes who knew how to thicken milk into something both edible and durable. He didn't understand the science, but he understood the outcome. Fermented milk worked. Now let's head east. In the Indian subcontinent, yogurt known as dahi wasn't just food. It was ritual. Ancient texts describe fermented milk used in religious offerings, daily meals. An Ayurvedic practice. Yogurt was considered balancing, cooling, digestible, grounding. Again, not magic, not mysticism. Fermentation breaks down lactose. It increases bioavailability of nutrients. It makes milk easier on the human gut. Cultures didn't need microscopes to know it worked. They trusted what generations before them had already tested. Across the Middle East, yogurt became foundational. It showed up as sauces, drinks, marinades, preserved forms like labna, salted, strained, dried. Yogurt adapted to climate, culture, and cuisine. And here's something important. Yogurt didn't spread because it was trendy. It spread because it solved real problems: preservation, nutrition, digestion in a pre-refrigeration world. Fast forward to medieval Europe. Yogurt wasn't common in Western Europe for a long time. Not because it was unknown, but because climate and dairy practices favored cheese and butter. Instead, fermentation took different forms. But that changed in the 16th century. According to well-documented accounts, King Francis I of France suffered from chronic digestive issues. A physician from the Ottoman world recommended yogurt. It worked. Yogurt entered European awareness not as comfort food but as therapeutic nutrition. Still, it stayed niche. What truly changed yogurt's fate wasn't kings or cooks, it was science. In the early 20th century, a Bulgarian scientist named Stamen Grigorov examined yogurt under a microscope and identified the bacteria responsible for fermentation, Lactobacillus bulgaricus. For the first time, yogurt wasn't just tradition, it was measurable. Soon after, Russian scientist Elie Metchnikov, later a Nobel Prize winner, connected yogurt consumption to longevity in rural populations. His theory wasn't perfect by modern standards, but his impact was massive. Yogurt became associated with gut health and long life. That association stuck, and this is where yogurt enters the modern world. In 1919, Isaac Carasso began mass-producing yogurt in Barcelona, naming his company after his son Danone. Yogurt moved from kitchens to factories, from tradition to packaging, from local to global. When yogurt reached the United States, it didn't land as dessert. It landed as health food, sold in pharmacies, marketed to immigrants, later sweetened, flavored, and adapted for American tastes. And this is where myths begin. Greek yogurt, probiotic superfood, ancient secret. Here's the truth: Greek yogurt isn't a different species, it's strained yogurt. That's it. Cultures across the Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia were straining yogurt centuries before branding existed. Probiotics? Real but not magical. Yogurt supports gut health because fermentation alters milk chemistry, not because it's a miracle cure. And there was no ancient secret, just observation, repetition, and survival. What makes yogurt extraordinary isn't mystery, it's reliability. Across thousands of years, across continents, across cultures that never met, people discovered the same thing. Milk, when fermented, becomes safer, stronger, and more useful. That's not coincidence. That's human intelligence at work. Today, yogurt sits in plastic cups under fluorescent lights. It's flavored, marketed, reformulated, but at its core, it hasn't changed. Milk, bacteria, time, the same process that helped nomads cross continents, the same food that fed ancient villages, the same chemistry that quietly shaped civilization. And if you strip away the marketing noise, that story becomes even more powerful, because yogurt isn't just food history, it's proof that humans didn't conquer nature by force, they learned to partner with it. If this kind of deep, myth-free food history is what you're here for, don't just watch, commit. Subscribe. This channel is building a library, not chasing clicks. And remember this: the next time you open a cup of yogurt, you're not eating a trend, you're eating 10,000 years of human survival. See you in the next story.